George Guidall, what's the hardest part about reading an audiobook?
The hardest part about reading an audiobook is that depends on the quality of the book. The worse the book, the harder it is to read. I'm coming up to 650 unabridged novels in my career now. And I find that the more difficult the book, the better the book is written. Proust, Dostoevsky, the classics, some wonderful authors I've had the pleasure to read. It's not hard at all. It's a gift that I'm given to be able to do this job. When I hit a book that is basically stupid, it's very difficult because my hostility builds up and I have to stop. And I don't like to stop as I record. So when the writing is loaded with gratuitous sex or violence for that purpose alone, I stop and I say, do I have to read this? Do I have to continue? And stopping makes it difficult. The mind goes away. The mind just floats away and I'm in an out-of-body experience. Don't forget, I read the book twice. I read the book first to prepare it, then I read it as I record it. Have you ever read a stupid book twice? It makes a person very uneasy. So ease, or let me say that difficulty, depends a great deal on the quality of the book. The better the book, the easier it is.
How would you judge the book Tides of War?
Oh, Tides of War is a fantastic achievement. Erudition is not my bailiwick. I'm not a scholar. My job is to really transform one art form into another. The written art form is the author's province. Spoken art form is mine. I'm an actor, and I record books. My job is to remain loyal to Mr. Pressfield in terms of the quality of that book, not to overdo it, not to over-dramatize it, but at the same time, in transforming that kind of work, I have to give it an emotional point of departure. I have to make the people in it seem real. I have to make it seem that Mr. Pressfield is talking to me through his characters. I'm talking to you through his characters. The Greek period, from Pericles on, before Pericles, is one of my favorite periods. It was in college. So it's a pleasure to read material that is beautifully written, beautifully constructed, about a period in history that I love. What can be better than that?
Have you ever met these authors?
Sometimes I have. I recorded I Know This Much Is True by Wally Lamb, and I might add, received the Audio Award for Best Narration of the Year for that. And struck up a relationship with Wally Lamb, who was thrilled, pleased as punch, with what I did with the book. Mr. I forgot his name, David Robbins, who wrote War of the Rats and End of War. Someone else who, as an author, they experience the spoken book quite differently, and they say, wow, I didn't realize this was in the scene. I didn't realize this much was in the book. As in the theater, sometimes you perform, or as you rehearse, and the author is watching, the playwright is watching, the playwright will say, I didn't know I wrote that in the scene, but it certainly is in there. So the joy of doing a book like Tides of War is to be immersed in quality writing, in almost lyrical rendition of a language, and an author who really knows what he's talking about.
Do you consider reading an audiobook acting?
That's a terrific question. Yes, to an extent. You can't act an audiobook in the same way you portray a character. I'm not portraying a character. Actually, what I really am is the voice of the author. The voice of the author that I imagine. If it's Mr. Pressfield, or if it's Tony Hillerman in the Southwestern Mysteries, whoever the author is, I have to picture him talking to me for a reason. Mr. Pressfield is writing this book for a specific reason. Alcibiades, a major character in the book, or Polemides, they are there because they're living a life. They're not there because they're in a book. That's my job. So the acting that goes on, yes, in scenes where there is dramatic conflict, I have to do that. So there is a degree of acting, but I can never lose sight of the fact that I'm talking to someone, telling them a story.
In terms of preparation, let's say you have two narrators. How do you prepare to play or read two different perspectives?
That's terrific, because this book, Tides of War, is through two perspectives. One, you can see that I never stutter and I never make mistakes as I speak. It's written through the grandfather of one of the characters in the book, and also is the voice of Polemides. Those are very two distinct characters, which makes the job a lot of fun. Vocally, I have to differentiate that. In the book, one character is in italics, and that's visual. But people listening don't have that at their disposal, so they have to hear the difference in character vocally. So vocally, I have to paint that picture. So yes, there are two distinct voices in this book, in addition to all the other characters in the book. And that's part of the fun, doing the various voices.
When you rehearse, do you rehearse in different voices at home on different days?
I don't rehearse the book. I read the book for preparation, for proper pronunciation, especially in this book, and get an idea of what the major voices are about, but I never practice beforehand. It happens in the booth when I sit down.
At the other end, do you have a lot of retakes?
Sometimes. I try my best not to have a lot of retakes, with the help of the engineer who is there following the text with me. If I stumble or if I say the wrong word, he'll stop and we go on. But as a rule, I try my best not to have it. It keeps the flow going.
This book, from what I understand, has a lot of Greek words in it. Mm-hmm. Does that get in your way, or do you enjoy the challenge?
Well, it's loaded with Greek names, villages, and luckily we have Paul Topping, who is a research assistant here, who is head of the research department. He speaks Greek and is well versed in it. As I said before, erudition is not my bailiwick. I don't know about that. That's his job. And I have about 20-odd pages of Greek words, all phonetically written, so that when it comes to that part of the page, and I can show you later, the page is all marked how to pronounce these words. I've never said these words and probably never will again after I finish the book. It's difficult and it slows me down, but it's part of the job.
What are some of the other challenges from previous books you've read?
Some of the other challenges.
Pronunciators.
Well, pronunciation, luckily I'm pretty easy with dialects and foreign languages. Again, problems arise when the book doesn't have a driving force of its own. And then I have to give it one. Then I have to almost machinate a reason for the book to be there. But other than that, the problems again go into quality of the material.
If you're going on a 6-hour or 7-hour car ride, can you listen to yourself read a book?
No, can't stand the way I sound. It's very hard. I listen. The more I listen to myself, every time when my wife and I are in the car, and we put a tape in because my wife likes to listen to them, I just hear things that I could have done better. So it's kind of a busman's holiday. It's difficult for me to listen, except in books that are the literary weight of which make me forget that it's me talking. And when we listened in the car to Crime and Punishment or Wilder Lamb's book or some other, or even recently we just finished Proust's In Swan's Way. These are literary monuments, and I forget that it's me talking. I get into the material.
How did you get started in this career?
Years ago, I started in, I was doing the lead in Chapter 2 on Broadway, Neil Simon's play. And someone from the American Foundation for the Blind came backstage and said, would you like to audition for us? I said, certainly I would. And I came, and the first book I did was a Western by Louis L'Amour. And at that point, I was very young and very cocky. Now I'm not young anymore. And I didn't bother reading the book beforehand. It was easy, no big words. And in the last chapter, the heroine said, as the hero got shot, I will never hear that nasal twang again. And I didn't read him with the nasal twang, because I didn't read the book beforehand, so I had to go back and record the whole book. But I started there, and I did I was there for several years, about 250-odd books for them. And then Claudia Howard. This is just for the American Foundation for the Blind, talking books for the Library of Congress. And then I got the call from Claudia Howard, who was our studio manager, to come and audition for her. And I think the first book I did here was Typhoon, Conrad's book. And she said, well, that was interesting. How about doing Beowulf? and so we began. And luckily, Claudia casts me in a wide range of characters, whether it's Tony Hillerman or Dostoevsky or at this point, I'm speaking as Alcibiades.
Is there a difference between reading for the blind and reading for regular listeners?
No. No, there is no difference. I go out and do personal appearances at libraries, which is our major customer. And I am constantly bowled over by the devotion these people have to readers. There are people who will come in and say, I don't care what the book is, just give me a book by George Guidall or Barbara Rosenblatt or someone else. And that adds such a sense of obligation to me, because it's easy to go into a sound booth by yourself and just do a number and go down memory lane all by yourself. But there are a lot of people out there who spend hours of private time, prime time in their daily lives listening to me. And that's an awesome responsibility. And I owe them honesty in my work and a kind of consistency so that they can depend, if this is a book by Guidall, it'll be something that I enjoy. And that's a constant reinforcement to me when I get a lot of fan mail from people all over the country who tell me how they enjoy my work. That makes it very important to me, and it's a very important job, and that's why I began this whole conversation by saying that I look on it as a gift. How many people can read close to 650 novels out loud to people? I'll tell you my fantasy, my little philosophical aside. The whole burgeoning of the recorded book industry is really a step back to answering a primal human need. I mean, it started in a cave when the saber-toothed tiger was walking outside and somebody was sitting around a fire talking to the rest of the clan about the great hunt that afternoon. And that went on for a while, that delivering a narration, a narrative like that. And then this awful thing called a book was invented, and it stopped people from talking to each other. And people started to read books, and that was the way people got told stories. Then something called movies were invented. That stopped people from reading books, and people went in this dark room and were told stories by seeing something. And now here we've come back. I mean, we've even skipped through television, and now we're back to being told stories again. And I think it's an essential need of the human being to hear another human being tell them a story. I think it makes us feel that there's somebody else here with us.
Did your parents read to you a lot when you were young?
Not really. My mother always complained that I never read enough. I would get 10 cents every Friday to buy a Superman comic book. And that was the extent of my reading. High school, nothing. I really started reading after I left college.
And do you have children?
I have 2 daughters.
Did you read to them when they were growing up?
Yes, I did. I now say, hey, girls, there's a lot of books in the room here. Would you like to read? They say, no, we don't want to. It's hard for them to listen to.
Do you hear back from the authors? Do you hear about their reactions to your
Sometimes.
work? Does that help?
Sometimes. Oh, I love it. It's just, the first one that comes to mind is David Robbins, who wrote War of the Rats and End of War. A wonderful writer in terms of historical fiction, the Second World War. I remember him here in the studio listening to a scene that I had just recorded. And it was the first time he had heard it. And the man sat there. This is the man that wrote the material, and he was moved. And what does that do to me? I mean, I just felt so gratified that he could appreciate it to that extent. And I've since spoken with him, and he's just turned on by this whole thing of the recorded book. And I was on the phone with him, and he said, well, how are you doing this voice, and how are you doing that voice? And they get turned on. Wally Lamb and I have a relationship at this point, and there was talk of him doing a series of readings where I would do one of the characters, he would do another character on his travels. And I forgot his first name, Dueling, his name is. He wrote White Man's Grave, was another actor, another author that I heard from. I'd love to hear from authors. I'm not sure, I would love to know each author's reaction when they hear these books, and there must be somebody that says, gee, I never meant for this person to sound that way.
What's the best-selling audio recording you've ever
I have no idea.
recorded?
I have no idea. They all are seemingly very, very popular. One thing that always surprised me was a series by Lillian Jackson Braun called The Cat Who ate Danish, The Cat Who read backwards, as a series of books about cats. Now, I don't like cats. I'm allergic to cats. And the first time Claudia gave me this book, I said, this is so light and so trivial. Is there anything else? She said, well, try it. Well, this is one of the most popular series across the country. I consistently get letters from people showing me pictures of their cats, of their Siamese cats, and saying, oh, you are this voice and you are that person in the book. So there's no telling which books are the most popular.
What about your learning curve? When you read a nonfiction book, 5, 10 years later, do you remember what you've read?
The better the book, the more I remember it. A lot of books go into the recycle bin. They're there to be read, and it's a job that I do. There are a lot of books that I would never, on my own, pick up and read. But I'll give you another old saw. One actor years ago, when I first started out, said, a professional is someone who loves what he does, even when he doesn't love doing it. And that's always stood by me. And I have as much responsibility reading a bad book to make the person listening enjoy it as I do reading Dostoevsky.
Finally, today, how did you prepare for this specific recording today? Do you have a routine in the morning before you come in? What helps you and your voice?
I've prepared this book. The book, I read the book first. I'm always, if I don't finish the book completely before I record it, I'm always at least 100, 200 pages ahead of myself.
Do you highlight certain things?
No, what I do is put in the diacritical marks so I know how to pronounce the names. I don't have to do any preparation before I come to the studio because I'm already prepared. Vocally, no. I spend about 20 minutes before the session starts with a daily diatribe of what makes me angry on the train, on the street, or what curmudgeonly expressions I like to give out, and then by that time my voice is warmed up and I'm ready to go.
And how long will the recording take today, do you think?
Out of a 6-hour recording session, which is my usual, the average book is about, I'd give about 2.5 to 3 hours of actual recorded time. That includes breaks, break for lunch, stopping for mistakes, telephone calls, that kind of thing. This book is much less. The time that's necessary to go through pages of Greek names, I have to stop recording, work together with the engineer, prepare the words that are coming up, make sure we both hear the same word, and then I go through it. So that's going to take, I would guess this book I would do about 2 hours of recorded time for the 6 hours.
How important is the engineer's role?
Tremendously important. Again, the better the book always comes in, because if the book is terrible and I've already read it, my mind just strays, and the tongue and the eye are used to working together now, and I will read books, stop for a break, come back after the break, and then an engineer will say, we start here, and I said, did I read this last paragraph? He says, yes, you did, and I have to hear it again because it's so mechanical at that point, and that's why I take the break, because I see it happening, so I stop, I go out to get refreshed, that kind of thing. The engineer keeps it clean, tells me sometime when I go over the top in terms of characterization, when I pronounce a word wrong, read too fast, read too slow, do the wrong voice for a character is very, very important. You can't do it yourself.